Welcome to the Weaver Sews. I'm Daryl Lancaster. This is a Monday Mini, part of a series, Behind the Seams, a look back at some of my favorite pieces from the archives. Sometime at the end of 2001, already writing pretty regularly for Handwoven Magazine, they asked me to do a feature on the color forecasting industry and create a couple of palettes for the readers based on current predictions. It was a fun article to research and write, and the response was so positive that it became a regular feature. I would set the palettes based on my research for the upcoming season, twice a year, spring and fall, and follow up those issues with the palettes actually used in garments. Who was selling what yarns in which colors? Who was designing garment patterns? Selecting weave structures that would work for the theme of each palette? All came into the discussion and ultimately in the layout of the article. I worked with a local illustrator, and I had a group of hand weavers who couldn't wait to be assigned a palette with an accompanying photo and description of the theme and see what they could come up with for the follow-up issue. In the January-February 2007 issue of Handwoven Magazine, I laid out 4 palettes from my research for fall-winter of 2007-2008 season. One of those palettes was called Arctic Sky. The colors were icy, dark, and analogous, meaning they were next to each other on the color wheel. Every so often, I'd take one of the palettes and create the garment for the follow-up issue myself. And I had planned that this one, the Arctic Sky palette, would be mine. I started looking through my stash to see what I had that would work. Lots of rayon novelties and some old Harrisville Shetland 2-ply wool that I couldn't say exactly where I got it and when. And there was also a variegated cotton flake, probably a mill end I picked up years ago from Silk City Fibers. I picked a simple twill variation spread over 8 shafts, since there was a lot of wool in the warp, and it is easier to create a shed when wools are spread over more shafts. My notes told me I put on 9 yards at full width of my little 24-inch wide Tools of the Trade loom. The weaving was probably uneventful. It was a long time ago, and only the events that caused me grief are the ones that usually stick in my head. I do, though, remember thinking to myself that this is not the most inspired yardage I've ever woven, and that ultimately thinking of the magazine article it would be featured in, I wasn't really excited. But the loom was set up, and I was weaving away 9 yards with a black rayon novelty as the weft, and it would be what it is. At my next Weavers Guild meetings, show and tell, one of the members showed a beautiful hand-dyed chenille jacket, her specialty, coincidentally in all the same colors of the Arctic Sky palette. Whenever I came across a perfect piece for the follow-up issue, I'd snag it for the article. Poor Carolyn didn't know what hit her. We used Carolyn's jacket for the issue, which left me off the hook with my mediocre yardage, and I could take my time getting it off the loom and find something more interesting to do with it than what I had originally planned. To be honest, I can't even remember what that was at this point. I did weave the yardage off and washed it well, allowing the wools to full up a bit, and it was okay. Just not inspiring to me. So I put it on the shelf. Fast forward to the end of January 2008. I had been asked to participate in a collaboration with another fiber artist to create an ensemble for the runway for the Convergence 2008 Weaving Conference in Tampa Bay, sponsored by the Hand Weavers Guild of America. I was paired with a very energetic woman from Texas named Loretta, who became a friend from the whole experience. That usually happens in this community. Loretta flew to my home in New Jersey that January with an entire suitcase full of bling, hot fixed crystals, beads, wools for felting, some fabric samples for dyeing, and lots of experience with surface embellishments. We spent a few days developing a game plan for the yardage that I had woven specifically for that assignment from yarns assigned to us from the conference colors. At the end of a fun week, Loretta decided that I needed to learn more about wet felting and pulled out some lime green wool locks and some lime green silk. We set up on my 2-yard cutting table and she showed me how to laminate wool locks to the silk base and create a narrow scarf from this technique. It was messy and fun. We laughed and chatted and got a bit carried away, so felted the wool more than we had intended. Once she left and the piece was dry, I tucked it into my stash shelf, wondering what I was ever going to do with it. The 2008 January issue of Burda Magazine had just come in. And I remember looking at it and seeing this really lovely jacket pattern and thinking, how would it look in this hand-woven Arctic sky fabric that I had on the shelf that wasn't terribly exciting? I started to assemble things that might want to play in this sandbox. What linings do I have? What buttons? And I spied this lime green, over-felted, very narrow scarf, and it screamed at me, "Use me! Use me!" Stuff on my shelf screams at me regularly. So I pulled it off the shelf and added it to the pile. My late husband traveled to India frequently and would always bring home a duffel full of silk saris, which I always used for linings. And since this jacket featured princess seams, I could pipe those seams with the felt. And suddenly I got really, really excited. Or I could pipe the shawl collar, another possibility. I draped a length of yardage on my form and tried to simulate what it would look like. Each side of the felted strip had the natural organic edge of the wool and silk laminate, and I really hoped to have enough to go up the front, over the shoulder, and down the back on each side of the garment. I made a test garment from some quilt fabric I had laying around. I was happy with the fit. I did some experimenting with fusible interfacings, and I decided that though this fabric was pretty stable, I'd be doing more tailoring to construct this piece, and I wanted the hand-woven fabric to really remain stable and not give or move in any way. So I fused and inserted weft interfacing onto the back of each of the pattern sections, one that has no give in either direction. I thought about the buttonholes and the welt pockets that disappeared into the princess seams. This now being 2009, I still had a hefty stash of ultra suede, and I thought that I'd use a navy blue from my stash for the buttonhole and welt pocket lips. And I had the exact color of embroidery floss, which would work for the top stitching, or better yet, couching. I will eventually do a video on couching. I touched on it briefly in the AMA video. And so with all the components in place, I started constructing the jacket. By 2009, I had started my blog. So the step-by-step construction of this garment was covered in the posts from mid-February to April of 2009. Just search for Arctic Sky Jacket. The link for my blog is below. And after 12 years and more than 850 posts, there's a lot of content there. And so here's the finished garment. And it turns out that from this mediocre fabric I wove, I have probably worn this jacket more than any other garment in my wardrobe. I love this jacket. I love the way it looks. I love the fit. And I love the details. Thanks for watching my Monday Mini. I'm Daryl Lancaster for The Weaver Sews.